We're here with Donnie Hensley today, considered definitely to be an expert on law enforcement in Texas. Donnie, could you tell us a little bit about your qualifications, your history in law enforcement?
Dan, as well as you know, I've been in law enforcement since the early 70s. I've worked criminal investigations, narcotics, been a police commander in 6 UN missions, and virtually worked the whole gamut from the lowest to the highest, with not only in Texas but in other countries.
Very good, Donnie. The reason we chose to interview you today is part of a social work presentation, and one of our goals is to raise awareness of Texas law enforcement as a form of social welfare. And we would just like to ask you if you could tell us a little bit about some of the experiences you've had in which law enforcement did act as a form of social welfare.
Dan, as you know, when you called, you asked me that question, I took the survey, I got to thinking about law enforcement and welfare. Is law enforcement part of the welfare system? And I was thinking, why not? Why would people not consider it? And then I get thinking about the aspects of social and law enforcement. What's the difference between a social worker and a law enforcement officer? There's only one difference: executive authority.
That's a very good point.
A law enforcement officer has executive authority, and people dealing with the police, deputies, whoever, see them as the executive paramilitary authority, but never as social workers. And the trouble is, a lot of the police and the deputies, even though we have come so far, still see themselves as the police, as someone else's problem, not realizing it is all of our problems. 80% of our calls are domestic or social related.
80%.
Over 80%. I guarantee you, I don't have the statistics
Right.
for you, but just out of my experience, I don't care what country you're working in, narcotics, child abuse, domestic violence exist all over the world. Here, having worked 16 years with the police department, 9 years in the prosecutor's office, several with the sheriff's office and narcotics task force, I can guarantee you that the narcotics and domestic violence are the majority of our calls. It all stems from one thing: either drugs, money, or sex, with no boundaries as far as age. What happened when I was working with the task force, narcotics task force, in Erath County, we had seized and removed over 48 children that tested positive for methamphetamine.
So these children weren't only in the same household with dangerous drugs, they tested positive for them themselves.
It's a carcinogen. I mean, they picked it up living in the home, by secondhand smoke, touching materials, being held by their mother, or being held by their parent, or some other one in the home. Well, the way the law was written then, that child had to test positive for methamphetamine or some other narcotic before we could file on the parents for endangering a child. Sheriff Bryant and I discussed it. We discussed it with the DA. This is not right. If we had 48, say like you seize one child, there's probably 30 others out there that are not getting the attention this one child does, or the social benefits. Excuse me. So what we did, we contacted Sue Miller, our state representative, via the DA's office, the sheriff, myself. We rewrote the child endangerment law. Sid Miller presented it, and Sheriff Bryant and I went to testify before the Senate and the representatives to change this law to where it read, if a child is in the area in contact with methamphetamine, whether they test positive or not, those parents have put that child in danger. Well, before we got to Austin, it got rewritten to the positive. They included any Schedule I narcotic.
Very good.
Not just methamphetamine, any Schedule I. So we go to the hearing. I don't know if anyone's ever testified or gave a presentation before the representatives for a law change. You're not on the floor, you're in an anteroom of about 100 people. And everyone there has the opportunity to protest the change of the law. More especially ACLU lawyers, defense attorneys, lobbyists, whoever. Representative Miller read the law and asked if we needed to testify to the law, and everybody said no. There was not one objection to the law as it was written. When you have defense attorneys, American Civil Liberties Union attorneys that agree with the police, that's a rare occasion.
Yes, it would have to be.
But it shows that everybody has compassion for our children in the state of Texas. The law passed. It works very well. The problem being is making people aware and enforcing the laws. Everybody does it. We've had this discussion several times.
Yes.
We have come so far that people don't realize how far we've come since the early, I can attest since the early 70s. From a 22-year-old rookie cop, seeing things I thought I never would see, and having no avenue of help. We didn't have active social workers in. We didn't have crisis centers. We didn't have suicide hotlines or nothing. And when they posed me the question, is police officers and deputies part of the social welfare service? I say yes. We're the first line.
I would agree with that.
Who's the first responders? EMT, paramedics, law enforcement. These other people do not get a call unless we follow protocol. Use the child abuse hotline, the child welfare hotline. Call the workers out immediately. Adult protective services, whoever we need. Until you haven't had that and needed it, to the point where we have it now and you don't use it, is asinine. We have mental health trained police officers and deputies now. We have teams with mental health that will come and do the evaluation if you call them.
Key phrase, if you call.
You have to be trained, prepared. I'm retired now.
Yes.
I still have my foot in law enforcement. I always will, because I don't know how to be a civilian. But the officers on the street don't think they're not doing anything. There's several avenues to be done, and they should and are being trained. You cannot. We have mandatory training each year. We have to get 40 hours of training each year. A lot of that is in racial profiling, domestic violence. These are mandatory, and we have to keep our license.
Also, all key aspects in social work.
I was in one of the first classes at Tarleton State University when they adopted the criminal justice program. I went from ag education to criminal justice. We had to have sociology, psychology to obtain our degree. And that tells you, even the thinking back in the 76,
Yes.
when they adopted the program, that you had to have sociology and psychology, besides all the other law enforcement aspects. You had to have these. And it has progressed ever since. But the key factor is And it always is and always will be. I don't care if you're in Dallas, Fort Worth, Hood County, Erath, developing a partnership and a team aspect. It's not us and them anymore. It ain't, well, I'm a cop, this is their problem.
Right, it's a matter of networking and referrals.
Networking referral. And you do that, you obtain that by standardization and documentation. You have a standard protocol, you have a procedure. But the whole thing is, it goes back to the individual officer. We have the laws. We have the facilities. We have the agencies. You just have to make that call.
No doubt. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as Donnie's taught us here today, without a doubt, law enforcement is at the forefront of social issues today and at the forefront of social work. Not only are they first responders, the first on the scene, intricate in organizing and bringing in other agencies and institutions, they are also, as Donnie told us from his personal experience, often responsible for forming social policy, changing social policy, and improving social policy. So I'd like to thank Donnie for being with us here today, and most of all for opening our eyes to just what an important part of social welfare and what an important social institution Texas law enforcement is. Thank you very much, Donnie.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, brother.